Hi everyone, welcome to our first Hangout with a book. We're here at the Garfield Heights Branch Library of the Cuyahoga County, and we're here to discuss 50 Children by Steven Pressman. My name is Matt Skavasic, and I'm a librarian at Cuyahoga County Public Library.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan Barrett, and I am also a librarian here at Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you want to join in our discussion today, there is a Q&A section of the Hangout, so you can type some questions there to join in the discussion. With that feature, you can actually also, if you like a question, hit that +1 next to the question to actually vote on a question, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can during tonight's discussion.
We apologize for the delay, and we're having some difficulties connecting with our author, Steven Pressman. We're hoping he can join us later in the discussion. We'll see if he can connect with us. And just a heads up, we will be talking about details from the book, so if you haven't read it, there will be spoilers. So maybe hit pause and come back to it later, or you view it on YouTube if you want to. But we do have a staff member that has joined us tonight's discussion from one of our other locations. So welcome, Pam.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to join the discussion this evening.
Great. And as Matt mentioned, we are hoping that our author, Steven Pressman, will be joining us later. I'm going to give a quick intro for Steven anyway, just because not only did he write this book that we're discussing tonight, but you may not be aware that he is also the writer, director, and producer of the HBO documentary, 50 Children, The Rescue Mission of Mr. and Mrs. Krause. So we're hoping that later on this evening, Steven will be joining us as well. And let's give a little background on the book.
The book is actually based on an HBO documentary, and the book and the documentary tells the story of an American couple, Gilbert and Eleanor Krause, and it is the story of their journey to Nazi-occupied Vienna to rescue Jewish children. In 1939, the Krauses left their comfortable home in Philadelphia and traveled to Europe on the eve of World War II, where they overcame mountains of red tape in both the U.S. and Germany to successfully rescue 50 children. The 50 children that the Krauses saved turned out to be the largest group of unaccompanied children brought to the United States during the Holocaust. Pressman's work draws from multiple sources, which include Eleanor Krause's personal memoir from the rescue effort and the first-hand accounts of some of the rescued children themselves.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so should we jump into the discussion?
Yeah, I would kind of like to discuss the Krauses a little bit and what motivated them to undertake the endeavor. What motivated Eleanor and what motivated her husband. Pam, do you have any thoughts on what possibly motivated them?
That's interesting, Matt, because that was one of the things that occurred to me as I was reading the book, too. I just wondered what well of passion inspired these two people. And it was fun watching the documentary because in the documentary, her granddaughter said Eleanor's motivations were somewhat mysterious. She knew her grandfather was a man of great passion and he would do what was right, so she wasn't surprised that he had undertaken a rescue mission, but her grandmother was more private. And I thought that was interesting that all of us are jumping on that same, because you do wonder, I mean, this woman had everything and 2 small children of her own. Why would you go into such a dangerous situation?
Well, to me, I don't know, she seemed conflicted at first, and she had this romantic view of, you know, oh, I want to do this, and at one point in the book, she calls it a luxurious dream. These children, and I don't know. To me, it seemed prior to her leaving, she had hesitation, but she seemed kind of naive about it.
Oh, absolutely, and I think she was apprehensive about it too. Like I think that Gil was really, I don't know, when I was reading, it seemed like he was kind of like the driving force behind their involvement in the mission, and she was nervous about, you know, they discussed in the book how dangerous it was for Americans to go over to Europe on the eve of war, and particularly women. And I think she kind of completely agreed with that and was very apprehensive. I almost wonder if she didn't really buy into why they were, I don't want to say she didn't buy into it, but really until she got to Vienna and actually met the children, met the families, that really then she kind of...
But to me, I think the first thought going through her mind was, as a parent, she was like, well, and I think it was a little selfish for hesitation, because it was like, oh, I have this privileged life, I have these kids of my own.
Right.
And I think that's totally justifiable to me, to have her kind of go, wait, this is really admirable, this is really noble, but are you sure?
Right, and then, exactly, and then once she got to Vienna, I think then when she was able to firsthand see, you know, what the situation was like, then it seemed like she got on board and truly understood what I think her husband kind of understood all along. At least when I was reading it, that's what I thought. Pam, what did you think?
No, I agree totally. I think you captured both sides of the equation there, and I just, the point about the children, that was a really difficult part of the story to read for me. I can't imagine looking at lines and lines and lines of parents and having to choose 50 children. That's it. Oh, such courage that took.
Absolutely.
Well, and one of the things in the book, it was 50 times this question was asked: will you leave your mama and papa and come to America with us? Each time the question was asked, I died a little more. I don't know. I don't think she anticipated that. Or at least that's the feeling that I got, was until she got up to that moment where it was that became very, very, very real as they were selecting the kids to come back with them, and to have to hear that straight from the kids themselves and the parents that were there. It's just gut-wrenching to me.
Absolutely, and then think of all the parents, I mean, as you were just saying, Pam, like all the parents that then, and children that weren't able to come. Like particularly they had, there was the one little boy that had initially been chosen, I think I have his name, Heinrich Steinberger. He had originally been chosen and then got sick right before they left, and they had to end up replacing him. And then we later find in the book that he died in a concentration camp. I mean, that was just, it was truly heartbreaking.
I think it is another one of those, in the afterword, they were talking about the fact that it is so hard for a human being to comprehend the numbers, and not just that must have been just incredible for them to go over and see the lines and lines of people just trying to go out of Vienna, just to get their children out.
Well, and the thing in the book that I didn't know prior, and I thought was one of the most interesting obstacles that they had, the statistics of it, and you know the quotas, and because they only let so many children, they have visas, and to have the Krauses be so worried that if a child didn't pass a physical or didn't meet the criteria that they needed, you know, if they didn't have financial stability and couldn't get themselves to take the journey or fund themselves to take the journey, the whole thing could have been null and void. And that was very surprising to me. That was probably one of the most interesting parts of the book to me was the bureaucracy of it, and the not only the Nazi requirements and maneuvering that to get the passports from the German side of things, but also from the United States standpoint, because they almost didn't allow it to happen.
Well, and they didn't know up until truly right before they were going to leave if they'd even have 50 visas. You know, it really wasn't until the end, because there was, you know, passages in the book where Eleanor and Gilbert were talking about, you know, what do we do if we don't have enough visas? You know, how do we handle this?
But I think that's what made this story so remarkable.
Absolutely.
Is that to me, the danger, there was danger always there. I mean, because they were American Jews in Nazi Germany. Danger was around every single corner. But it was the fact that because of a simple bureaucratic error or a simple, oh, we can't authorize these visas, the whole thing could have just fallen flat.
Okay, so since we're talking about obstacles, I'm going to pose another question. So we're kind of started talking about some of the large and small obstacles that the Krauses encountered. What do you think, Pam? What do you think? Why do you think they succeeded, considering these obstacles? Can you think of? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it almost goes back to what Matt was saying originally, the naivete. They were determined that it was going to go right. They did everything they could to make sure that it was going to go right. Gil especially wasn't going to accept that it wasn't going to go right, and they just forged ahead. And it was interesting because they were talking in the book about what we consider to be American values, and Gil certainly was evidence of all of those, that determination, I'm doing what's right regardless of what obstacles are put in front of me, I'm moving forward. And then he was lucky, let's face it, because there were certainly a lot of other groups that were trying to get children and Jewish people out of those countries that didn't have that kind of success.
Truly, I don't know, I thought Gil was attentive to detail almost to a fault. Like, to me, he was so concerned with crossing every T and dotting every I. I think he was the perfect person to do it because he was, like, you almost had Gil, who was the number cruncher and the handled all the paperwork, whereas Eleanor was making sure the kids were getting some of those emotional things that they needed, and to me, they played off of each other very well, and they made it a success because they were both there.
Well, and she did the affidavits as well. So she did it, yes. So, and I think that was important. And truly, I agree with both. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying, Pam?
No, I agree with you. I think, she was the one that was so meticulous at the very beginning, with all those affidavits. And I thought that was really interesting that she made 4 extra, just in case, something happened.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, she certainly covered her bases. But, I think what also made them successful was actually the diplomats and the government officials that they were dealing with. I mean, they said, I think it was in the afterword of the book, that it was discussed George Messersmith and Raymond Geist. So Messersmith in D.C. and then Geist in, I think he was in the Berlin office.
Consulate office, yeah.
Yes. I mean, truly, I do think that of course, the affidavits that Eleanor had completed and Gil's kind of like tenacity throughout the whole thing and just desire to get this done. But without the help of those 2 individuals, I mean, I don't think they would have been. I mean, they were ultimately the ones.
The inside people.
Yes,
yeah.
That made sure that there were visas secured and kind of, like, yes, this plan could work. Like, we can't say for sure it's going to work.
But we're going to do everything that we can to internally make it work. Yeah.
But this is a plan that sounds like it's going to work.
So we have a question from someone who's watching. And the question is, do you think that the children knew what was coming in Europe before they were rescued?
And before we answer this question, just heads up again, if you're watching and you want to ask a question, please feel free to use the Google Plus Q&A feature. And again, you can vote for questions. Okay, back to the question.
So, Pam, do you think the children knew what was coming in Europe? And I guess the question really would be, did the folks in Vienna know what was coming prior to the rescue? And I would say it was more of a feeling in Europe. I don't know that they knew how nasty it was going to get. I think they got a first taste of it with Kristallnacht and with their homes being ransacked and this and that, and them losing their businesses. But I don't, at least in the book, I don't know that they got a complete feeling of peril just yet.
The children?
The children, correct.
Yes. And I wonder if part of it is also just the age. I mean, I think children can sense things, but as a child, could you really imagine?
No. No, I would
be naive.
I think that there was a. I think that was one of the interesting things that Mr. Pressman brought up is some of the children's parents were telling the kids, we need to get you out because I want you to live, and other parents were kind of, you know, oh, you're going to go have a nice vacation with your aunt and uncle.
Right.
It was, I think, one of the most, for me personally, one of the most miraculous parts of the book is that people are people regardless of the circumstances that they're in. That, you know, the quotes that Mr. Pressman used throughout from the parents and the children, some of them realized how difficult it was, others didn't or didn't want to admit that it was that ugly. But the one child's dad had just got back from a concentration camp, so he obviously knew how terrible the situation was and how important it was to get his child out. But you know, I think the children, again, one of the parts of the book that was just evokes such an incredible picture was when she talked about all the parents standing there and smiling as they said goodbye. Oh, I can't even talk about it. I can't imagine.
I know. Are you talking about at the train station?
Yes.
When all the children were leaving?
And the parents are waving.
Explain it a little more, Pam, for the people that may not have read that section. Can you elaborate a touch, or?
Well, it was the children were getting on a train, saying goodbye to their parents. The parents did not know whether they were going to get visas to get out to see their children ever again, and not one of them cried. None of the parents broke down. They all smiled and waved goodbye to their children.
The poignant part about that scene to me was that they couldn't wave, because Jews weren't allowed to
raise their arm. Anyway. Yeah. Oh.
And that was heartbreaking to me, because as a parent, you want to wave to your kid and you want to say goodbye, and you have to stay strong in this really odd way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were all sorts of examples of courage and bravery in this book. It wasn't just the Krauses.
No.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you.
No. I wanted to talk about consider the passage where Gil and Eleanor are spending time in Berlin and Austria together, and they go away for this weekend to kind of regenerate. And the author describes the anti-Semitic signs posted on the street, and that all the Jewish shops and restaurants are closed. And in Vienna, you see all these banners and you see all these signs of Hitler and things like that. And the couples reacted very strongly to it when they got there. You had these reactions of Gil and Eleanor in Vienna, but when they get to Budapest, it's almost like they're able to remove themselves for this weekend, not only mentally but visually, and it's like they can breathe again. To me, those moments made me feel relief for them. But how did the author's descriptions make you feel in Europe? Like it made those descriptions very real to me. But did you have any thoughts on that, Megan?
Yes, I mean, truly, I agree. I think that the author painted like a very vivid picture of what things were like during that time period. And I mean, when I was reading Eleanor's description of Vienna and the signs in the restaurants and in the stores, and all of that stuff, I was very like apprehensive and anxious because it kind of just fed through. But what was interesting, kind of fitting in, so that's going on. Of course, they've already started, and I believe Kristallnacht had already occurred too. But it was still during that time period, and one of the children, and this kind of is answering this question, but also going back to Pam's question about some stations that were peppered throughout the book as well. And there was one of the children had said, and it was still during this time period, that at that point, the Nazis were still letting Jews leave. Because at that point, they just wanted the Jewish population out of Vienna. And I think it was Henny, and she said, I don't know, Matt, do you have a page on that?
Yeah, it's page 35. It says, what people don't understand is that in the beginning you could get out. Everyone could get out, but nobody would let us in.
And I think that knowing that, like reading a quote like that, and then reading, these descriptions of how oppressive, truly, and frightening things were getting for Jews in Vienna, but then also knowing how many people were trying to get out and had nowhere to go, just made it, I don't know, that much harder to read. I don't know if either of you kind of felt similarly when you were reading.
Pam, to me, that was one of the most impressive things of the book. I mean, it read like a journalist's take, and I know he has a background as a journalist as well, but it read as a journalist's take of what was going on. So you got the description, you got just straight ahead description of the banners and the smoke. And there was a scene, probably one of the scariest scenes. It reminded me of Star Wars, actually. You had this scene where the one child, and I don't remember who it was, but he remembers Hitler's car coming around down the boulevard and seeing it out the window. And it's almost like this cloud, this black cloud coming into the city. And it was prior to the Krauses getting there, but it definitely placed you there in the time period. So
I agree. The book had a tremendous sense of place, and the pictures that he chose to start each chapter added so much to our visual perception of what was going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And if you haven't, just heads up, if you have not read the book, but you're joining us and watching it, I mean, truly, just for the pictures and the quotes, I mean, just even paging through it, I mean, absolutely, you should truly check it out. And you can always check it out at the library to get a copy of the book.
And it is available as a download in e-audio as well.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit because the book kind of ends with updates of the rescued children. And I almost wish there was more of that because you only got a paragraph snapshot of that. And I was kind of upset that you I mean, granted, you can't fill a whole, you could fill binders full of these people's lives, but I wanted to know what happened to all of their parents as well. And you didn't necessarily get that throughout the. You got some where they knew what had happened to the children's parents, but I really wanted, like, it left me wanting more at the end of these kids' lives.
Absolutely. And actually, I would be curious too. I know that I think it was in the book too because we don't know what happened to all of the children. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't there almost like a call at the end of the book if you know what happened? So, Stephen, I know that you're not able to join us, but that would have been a great, to see if since the book has been published or since the documentary has been out, if there's been any contact from additional children.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
You know what I thought was interesting about that ending, though, was that at first I prepared to be a little bit disappointed because I thought, well, this is kind of anticlimactic, just listing each child. But then I was reflecting on the fact that throughout the book we're talking about the fact that those 50 lives that have gone on to influence so many others. So even when you're reading a chapter that just says, she got married and had 3 children and now she has 7 grandchildren or whatever it was, those 10 people would not be alive and contributing if that first child had not come. And it just was, it was just interesting that those lives are just as important as the composers and the violinists and the wonderful authors and the crusaders that came out. The lives of those 50 children had an impact, and I just, it really was very moving.
I agree. I almost found it, you know, instead of anticlimactic, I almost thought of it as almost like quietly powerful. You know, just kind of not a lot of fanfare, but it didn't need it because it said it all, you know?
Yes,
so,
yes, I agree.
Yeah, to me it was, I liked it because to me it's like those, granted it was just 2 sentences or 3 sentences of updates of the kids, but it's like that their story is told a little bit, you know, because they may have been a nobody, you know what I mean, but it doesn't matter because to someone they were, you know, and they kept their beliefs and their heritage and their family's name alive, and I think that was my biggest takeaway from the book, actually.
It was really well done. One of the points that you guys didn't mention that hit me, I was completely shocked by the organized groups that tried to stop and persuade Gil and Eleanor not to go across. I just couldn't believe that the organized rescue groups were. I would have thought that they would have said, yes, anybody that can get people out, do it, do it, do it. And instead, they were having active opposition.
Well,
such a shock.
Absolutely.
We have a comment from Hallie here. She says, I was surprised by how little support the U.S. was providing to people trying to leave Europe. And I think that speaks to the groups as well. I think a couple things going on. You had American isolationism that was just saying, at that point, we don't want to be involved.
And feelings of anti-Semitism also in the U.S. as well.
But then I think you had these groups saying, oh, it's too difficult, you know, let's let it be someone else's problem.
Or groups that were not successful, which was even worse when it was the groups that weren't successful themselves and were kind of like, hey, we weren't able to do it, so we don't want you to be able to do it because you're going to make us look bad, which is terrible when you're trying to truly save people's lives.
Well, but look at it the other way around. If you had, let's say, you're Gil and Eleanor Krauss, and you're mounting this rescue effort, it was almost better that they had the group of people that they had and didn't have more people supporting them, because it would have gotten too big. It would have gotten too, you know, too many cooks.
You mean just the Krausses?
I think the people that they had involved, the doctor, it was the right set of people doing the right things at the right time. Like, I think if there was any other involvement or anything else, the potential for it to not work grows exponentially. So I think it was just the right mix at the right time.
I agree with that.
And then in the middle of it all, for there to be romance, you know, for Hetty and
Dr. And it was funny, when I was reading the book, it was really interesting, and we discussed this a little bit, but it truly, like, though it was nonfiction, to me it read a lot like fiction, and I'm reading it, and I was thinking, I was like, oh, like, I'm sensing some romance between Hetty and Dr. Schleff. So then at the end, when he was like, oh, I can't believe I left her, and I was like, yeah, he got it, you know, very exciting.
It read to me like a film. I mean, if you would have told me that this was true, or it seems too made up. I mean, it seems like it's like, oh, that's Hollywood, you know?
Right.
So,
which is interesting because the book I've written, because it seems Hollywood, but the book's actually based on the film, which is, I mean, this is a documentary, so it is true, but still, kind of, there is a cinematic quality.
There is.
To it, for sure.
There is.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that he doesn't romanticize any of it. I mean, he really sticks true to the facts. He sticks through to the grit and the smoke and the scariness. And I think his journalistic voice is informed by, you know, it's informed by Eleanor's personal account. So we're almost seeing it through her lens, which I think is why it works so well.
Right. I agree with that. Absolutely. Especially because she was apprehensive, and you see her journey as the mission is going on, you know?
Yeah, I remember when I got, it was like right near the beginning when they stopped talking about the plan and started talking about the rescue. Like it was part 1 and 2, and he shifted perspective to tell you from the children's point of view. And I remember the first time I reading it going, wait, what is this? This doesn't match up to me. But I appreciated that shift in tone a little bit.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What struck me is it relevant today? Is it relevant to Americans today? Was this more of a Jewish rescue? Was it more of an American rescue? And if it were a situation that was happening today, would we do it? You know, I know the circumstances would need to be different, but to me, it is not just a Jewish issue. It is not just an American issue.
It's a human issue.
It is a human issue, right?
Pam, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it is a human issue, and look at the problems that we're having with immigration today. You know, have we really learned that much? I mean, nobody is coming out of Mexico or Cuba, or, well, Cuba kind of, but I mean, nobody's coming out of Mexico and saying, you know, I'm going to put people in concentration camps and kill them all if they don't leave the country. But you have people that are leaving a country because of poverty and discrimination and the inability to have a satisfactory life, and we've got immigration laws in place that are preventing them from coming over. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it is certainly not an issue that has been resolved in any satisfactory way.
No, absolutely not. I completely agree with you. I do think that in a different, not quite history repeating itself, but you're right, it's still, immigration is still an issue. Clearly, it's still very...
But today, I don't know that you would see a private group or private citizens take matters into their own hands.
What about Doctors Without Borders? Don't they take things into their own hands?
Yeah, I guess they do.
I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out here. I think what you said about it being human nature, and I don't think that human nature has changed a lot. If people feel like their own way of life and their family, maybe defined broadly, but their family is being threatened, they're going to do what they need to defend. And if that means not letting others in or not letting, you know, strangers come, that's the stand they're going to take.
Well, and I think, I mean, throughout history, I mean, I think the U.S., as much as, you know, the United States is touted as, you know, give me your poor, give me your hungry, and, you know, welcoming, really throughout history, you know, prior to World War II and certainly after World War II, I mean, we kind of have like a very nativist feeling, you know. I think that there are lots of, not lots of, but there's definite anti-other sentiment.
But I think
in history.
No, well, but I think now it's a democratic issue. It's a freedom issue. It's a, you know, if someone's being oppressed from a dictatorship or something like that, as a country, we take it upon ourselves to do that. And I think, because we support freedom and we support human rights, you know, whereas back
But do we always?
I would hope so.
But what about people that are, I mean, currently when we're talking about people leaving, you know, from Mexico or, you know, Central and South America, when they're illegally crossing the border, I mean, these are people that are escaping dangerous situations, and children that are doing this too, that are illegally crossing the border, and there's still all of these issues with illegal immigration.
It's very interesting because you're going back to what was happening with the U.S. government at the time.
Right. Although I think what's different about this wasn't even, like during World War II, it wasn't even, well, I guess similarly, but I mean, what was most crazy, I don't even know if we talked about this, but just the fact that there were the quotas of visas and not all of them were being used. I mean, because that was what was, I think, I know I'm kind of like shifting gears here a little bit, but that was what was crazy to me. It's like not even, I mean, even with the opportunities for legal immigration with visas, there were a number of visas that were just not being used
Well,
at that time.
and I think that's why the Krauses were kind of frustrated with the whole process, because they had, it was a loophole. I mean, it was considered a loophole, but they were like, well, but wait, there's these going unused. Can't we just do that? And at first they were told no. They were told, well, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It is amazing to me how relevant the book is. You know, it's not just a piece of history. When you're reading it, because there is so much just human nature at all levels, the book is very, very relevant.
Do you think that something like that rescue effort, is it possible today? Is it possible? Is it feasible? Is it likely today? You know, if we picked a group somewhere that was like in Rwanda or in, you know, somewhere far off that was being singled out, persecuted.
I don't know. I know that's like not really an answer, but I don't know.
I would like to think it would.
I would hope so, but I don't know.
I'm kind of with Megan, because if you think of the although there was a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of paperwork and stuff that they had to go through, I would be willing to bet that there's probably 10 times as many levels of bureaucracy that someone would have to go through today to get those unused 50 visas.
Yeah.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, so we are going to do our last question.
One last question.
Sound good? Okay, so last question. There are a lot of books written about the Holocaust. What do you think that this book offers that's different? What do you guys think?
I think it goes back to, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the comments that, I think it was Hallie that had posted for us here, where I didn't know about the visas, I didn't know about the quota system, I didn't know that America was so isolationist at the time. And that, like, that wasn't, no, it wasn't the most harrowing part of the story, you know, but I never learned that before. I never even knew that that happened, you know, those things existed. So to me, that was the peek behind the screen of what was going on, you know, bureaucratically and governmentally at the time. So I appreciated those little things. I didn't know.
I did too, and I appreciated, like for me, what was different is, like I've read a lot of book, whether it's historical fiction or nonfiction, that's, you know, more about concentration camps and kind of that aspect. So to, like, first background for the U.S., that absolutely was part of it for me. But then also, we talked about like the mood that Pressman painted in Vienna, and kind of what was going on in Vienna, and just the stories of, I mean, this was 50 children that were able to get out, but just the fact there was a story of parents trying to save their children, really. That was different for me, that it wasn't in like a concentration camp setting. I don't know, Pam, what do you think?
No, I agree. And one of the other things for me was a little bit like what you're saying, Megan. It was hopeful. You know, it ended on a note that those children were saved and went on to have productive, happy lives.
Absolutely.
And it was just a wonderful tribute to his kind of grandparent-in-laws. Is that would that be the relationship? And I just was really impressed with how Mr. Pressman put that story together and paid tribute to a very extraordinary couple from Philadelphia.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you both for joining. Pam, thank you so much. Everyone that was watching, thank you. And thank you for posting questions. You know, thank you. This was great.
We're sorry that the author couldn't join us
Right,
tonight.
of
We had
course.
some technical difficulties. But the author will be joining us at our Parma Snow Branch this Sunday, September 14th at 2 o'clock as part of the Mandel JCC Cleveland Jewish Film Festival. The Cuyahoga County Public Library will be hosting a film screening and a 50 Children documentary and a Q&A with Steven in person.
Absolutely. So if you had any questions for the author that unfortunately weren't able to ask tonight, please use that opportunity to ask him your questions. And we wanted to mention that our next Google Plus Hangout with the Book is actually going to be on Monday, September 22nd. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will be discussing Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, just in time for the movie.
Just in time for the movie,
yes,
everybody.
the movie comes out October 3rd, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, so please absolutely join us for that. And thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye.
Bye.